Well, LSU got some bad news this week, and unfortunately, it was Monday, so we know it wasn't an April Fool's joke. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's recruit Dat Boot. We'll talk about the latest news heading elsewhere for the Tigers, as well as some of the other notable in-state commitments to some other in-state programs over the course of March. I'm Jet Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman. Sam, how we doing to kick off April?
I'm doing great. I'm just celebrating your birthday here in Texas, waiting for you to possibly manage through this impending storm that's hitting Texas, the Gulf Coast. Basically, I saw in the forecast everywhere from Florida to New York. So if you want to get away from it, you can't. But that's for a special segment that we'll hit at the end called Sam's Weather Report. Let's focus back on what's really important, and that's your birthday.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. I'm over here sipping on an iced coffee in a mason jar, so very basic white action happening on my birthday right now. As I get closer and closer to 40, I'm just treating it like I'm a 19-year-old girl heading to intro to econ or whatever. But I
that should be a life philosophy.
I appreciate it. I'm appreciating the Sam's weather report too, because I am nervous about whether it's going to be worthwhile to make this drive out to the DFW as we watch the radar heading into this weekend. Wanted to go see a weekend of flow out at OT7 and some of these other great LSU targets for other teams that are going to be out there. But man, I'm nervous about this weather.
I am too. You already got my weather report. It's frustrating because it's a time sensitive event. So it's like whether the rain is going to be a factor. It's just, all our time in Louisiana and obviously the impact it's had on me since. I just don't trust weather. So I could be forecasting on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and it means absolutely diddly squat come Thursday and Friday when it's time for the rain to fall. We'll see how it comes. We'll see what Mother Nature has in store for us. I will be there when you tell me. I'll be there though, and we'll figure it out. And like you said, hopefully this will be me bookending the OT7 season. Was there for week 1. We'll be back for week 4. Like you said, I'm super excited to see what this flow dynamic looks like after week 1. And they've been rebooting, no pun intended, or maybe a pun intended. They've added some more star power. They had star power to begin with, but sometimes when you give a group like this with plenty of that star power and some great coaching minds behind it, I wouldn't be surprised if they made some noise to close out this regular season up at OT7.
The rebooted pun is fine. I said refloated when they were, some of the guys from North Louisiana were first tweeting out the graphics a week or so ago. And look, as we sit here on Tuesday, I still don't know what the hell this roster is about to look like. I think there's just been some miscommunication between sides as they kind of sort out some of the details. And so I just would love to know who's going to be there, assuming that I'm going to be there, assuming that we're going to be there. As you said, can't trust weather. I don't really trust much anything these days. It's 2025 and I've been through enough in life. I think I've just got trust issues all around. But, in kind of the vein of that, let's talk about that bad news I mentioned for LSU. Blaine Bradford, a guy who I really expected, and we'll see now how it goes, but I expected to be in purple and gold at the next level. The safety from right there down the street at Catholic Baton Rouge, younger brother of 2025 signee Jacob Bradford, he announces on Monday morning that he has committed to the Ohio State Buckeyes, the reigning national champions, a school that, we talked about it. I think you got the text while we were recording one day when he went up there and ran the 4.440 over the summer on his trip up there, and they just stayed heavy with him. How surprised were you Monday to hear that Blaine was committing to the Buckeyes, and he was committing to the Buckeyes this early in the 2025 calendar ahead of a lot of potential official visits here that we were anticipating later in the spring and into the summer?
Yeah, I was mostly surprised about the timing of this all. Blaine had been pretty far along in his process where he was down to 2 teams, even though he had Texas around in his lead group. He'd be the first to tell you that was more for his grandfather, who was a big Texas fan. And obviously with Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon both going off to the Saints and Georgia Tech, respectively, those were the lead guys recruiting him. So Texas had fallen out, even though they were still technically in his league group. But this has been LSU versus Ohio State since, I would say, November. After he visited to Ohio State, his father had told me that visit moved the needle more than they had anticipated, and he saw a different side of Blaine. You and I have spoken on the podcast and off air. He's just a different kind of kid. He kind of marches to the beat of his own drum, and to leave the state of Louisiana, that's the kind of profile you need. You need to be someone who kind of can drown out the outside noise, because when you're in Baton Rouge or you're around the action, people are constantly going to bug you about, are you going to stay home? Are you going to flip? Are you going to, do this, do that? I think Blaine is going to handle that fine. From what I gathered, this was not about, NIL. This wasn't about anything more than Ryan Day and Matt Guerrieri, Ohio State's young safeties coach, recruited the heck out of Blaine Bradford. And he was on campus for 3 days, from March 29th through yesterday, March 31st, with his mom, with his dad. And by the end of the visit, the winning culture at Ohio State, this is a team that is coming off a national championship and has the number one safety in the country, Caleb Downs, playing like the number one safety in the country. And when you're Blaine Bradford, who, by the way, is the number one safety in the country, there's a lot to see right in front of you. The proof is already in the pudding. That's not to say that that LSU wasn't recruiting him like a priority. We know that is the case. We know that his relationships and connections to LSU are extremely high, and his older brother is going to be a freshman in that DB room in a couple of weeks. Nonetheless, I think when you look at the winning culture that Ohio State has, it overlaps a lot with what they do at Catholic High. And I think when you look at the proof of the NFL draft production, they're as matched as LSU or Alabama or any school in the country. And I think with Blaine's, personality, the way he goes about business, he's the kind of kid that can go to Ohio State and be an absolute stud, as long as he's comfortable playing outside of Louisiana, which he certainly showed he was.
You hit on a few different points there that I think are certainly worth, venturing down those angles when we're talking about a guy who is one of the most talented and high profile kids in this 2026 class in Louisiana, certainly, but on a national scale, obviously, when you start looking at the type of teams that have been recruiting him, like the Ohio States, LSU's, Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon, Alabama, and so far down the list, there's a reason why everybody wanted Blaine to be a part of their 26 class. I mean, let's start with first the question that a lot of LSU fans are asking is there a chance to possibly flip this situation by the time signing day rolls around? I was trying to think for Catholic High Baton Rouge, how much or little of a track record there has been of guys flipping commitments between schools. And I don't know that there's a ton of it, but obviously a year ago, when the circumstances are right, you've got a man named Jacob Bradford who was committed to Houston before LSU really came into play. And then he ends up flipping and is a part of this 2025 class. And I mean, it's just recruiting in 2025 and 2026. So you never really know until ink hits paper. But LSU fans, I'm sure, want to know, is there a chance to potentially still team up the Bradford brothers to get Blaine in this class in 2026? And I know Ohio State has lost some guys in recent classes as well. So some of the Ohio State fans I even saw on Twitter that were a little bit too nervous to get overexcited just yet. What do you think the potential is that this thing could still go down to the wire and maybe flip back the Tigers' way by the end of it?
Yeah, it's the obvious elephant in the room, right? This is we're recording this on your birthday on April 1st, and signing day is months away. There's a lot that still needs to happen. Blaine, from what I've gathered, is still intent to go on his official visits right now. And when you live in Baton Rouge, even if he cancels his official visit in June, that Jake Olson, Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, Brian Kelly, Frank Wilson are not going to stop recruiting the number one safety from Baton Rouge. You're 100% right. The only Catholic prospect that I can recall flipping is Blaine's brother. That's not to say that a flip is eventually going to happen. To think it's just going to, it's going to organically occur is naive, because Ohio State is, not only are they a team that competes for national championships, they compete for recruiting championships. And they do this every year with star players, getting them to commit early in the process, which Blaine was more than happy to do. And then they hold on, usually more often than not. I think that there is a very good shot that he is going to continue to be back on LSU's campus. If it's not for the fact that, obviously, like I said, Coach Olson, Coach Raymond, Coach Baker, Coach Kelly, Coach Frank are not going to stop recruiting him, but he's going to want to see what his brother is doing at his freshman year. With being what I think someone tweeted, they live 13 minutes away from campus or whatnot.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going to be able to get him on campus for a few opportunities here and there to meet with the family and make sure that he is comfortable leaving the state before he eventually does so. I think if any team can flip Blaine, it would have to be LSU. But from that point, they have a lot of work to do now. It's the same as when we talked about Tristan Keys last week. You would rather play from ahead than behind. But the benefit of having, a 5-star in your backyard, the same way that this LSU staff, when they had Kelvin Joseph flirting with Alabama, it's not over until it's over, which means they'll have plenty of time over the summer and in the season before the decision is finalized. But I think it's a little bit optimistic to think that it's going to happen at this point, because if you know Blaine and if you know how recruiting works right now, his commitment is the strongest. So LSU fans complaining in his mentions is the wrong way to be going about changing his mind.
Complaining in the mentions is generally always the wrong way to go about anything with all of this stuff. And there are so many times that we could have conversations about any number of recruiting dynamics, and watching the way that fans then interact with guys. I mean, across the board, anywhere from giving them hell, which is obviously absurd. This is a teenager that you've never met before, all the way to there are times where fans are on guys mentions and talking about, you need to go here, and they're talking about a school that the kid would like to go to but wouldn't be a take. And so you're just kind of rubbing in the fact that, hey, you should go to this school that you want to go to but is not actually an option for you. So just across the board, the chatter often becomes at least as much of an issue or a detriment to your school's recruiting efforts, if not more so than some of the helps it can be, just watching the avenues that people take with it. But I'm not going to go on any more of a Rosa rant on that situation than what we just got. Obviously, I'm a little bit fired up about some of it.
The floor is yours, birthday boy. If you want to keep going, we got all the time in the world.
But talking about Blaine, and you mentioned just the dynamics of being the hometown guy and dealing with hearing, not just on Twitter or X or social media or whatever, but around town, hey, around school all day, every day? What's up? You got to end up in purple and gold. You mentioned a couple times, or I think 3 times, just his mental makeup and the way that he's wired and being kind of built for a lot of this stuff. And I think that's a piece of the equation of why he is such a highly regarded young student athlete, is because he is wired to be a guy that can lock in, focus, be a leader, block out a lot of those things, be a guy that can venture across the country and be successful really anywhere that he lands. When you look at some of those elements, as well as obviously a 6'1", 6'2", 205-ish pound safety who will unload some of the most explosive hits you'll see at the high school level, while also running that 4.4 40 all over the country for college camps. Just kind of giving your scouting breakdown on Blaine. Why has Blaine become, or what have you seen from Blaine and his development from when he was first getting recruited as a freshman over there at Catholic High to now being one of the top targets on a national scale, that was on the front page of ESPN's website yesterday because he committed to Ohio State, and a guy that all of these programs wanted so badly?
Yeah, he is definitely just a different kind of kid. His mental makeup, like you mentioned, the way he goes about business. I mean, you and I both know that college coaches around the country were curious, was he going to grow into a linebacker, into a safety? And to see him respond without responding, there's a lot of different ways to go about your business. All he did was spend all of last offseason, spring and summer, training, retooling his body, learning how to run 40s and test extremely well, and build out his frame to be unquestionably the number 1 safety in the country. No one is saying, is he going to grow into a linebacker at this point? He is a big safety that can move at 4.4 speed. You talk about His sophomore season obviously was plagued a little bit by injuries, and then for him to come back, have the pick six in the state championship game against Acadiana, and then I think that was a little bit of a taste of what the entire ride was like all of last year. You and I were in the rainfall for his opener, and he unleashed some hell on some Destrehan ball carriers in that game. Not only does he hit like a linebacker, the direct routes to the football, how quickly he can cover ground in a hurry. He takes direct pass. He's a short tackler, but he also has the ability to, pry the ball loose because he hits like a machine. But where he stands out is that instinct play in coverage that we have seen time and time again, whether it's the state championship game against Acadiana, whether it is the 7-on-7 setting against Bryce Underwood last year, where he is able to fly around the football, break up a pass. He can nearly intercept it if not for having, 2 or 3 other players in the vicinity. I just think his innate feel for the position, his ability to cover so much ground, and he plays the ball like it's his, which is what you want from a free roaming safety. And I think the best part about it, when you talk about these traits, he can be a traditional free safety, but I think he can play in the nickel, which we saw him do really well at LSU camp last year. I think he can play close to the line of scrimmage if you want a little bit of a freelancer like Jamal Adams used to be back in the day. But if you want him to be a traditional safety or line up on one side of the field, he is a baller and the best in the country at that. So, I think he is the total package at safety. I don't have a knock on Blaine. And I think it only adds when you add that personality factor, the way he is made up, the way he goes about his business quietly but effectively. I think he's as sure of a thing as you can get at that position.
He's one of those guys that we talk about so much that is so enjoyable and funny and nice and just a great kid off the field. And then you put him on the field and he is just a savage out there from that safety position. And it has been so important to him to stay at that position because he likes the opportunity to be flexible, do some of those different things you mentioned. He likes to play a little bit on the back end and keep things in front of him and feel like he's in control of the field and of the game. And he does such a great job with that. Both in terms of his athletic tools and his ability to get from point A to point B in a hurry, but his recognition, anticipation, and break on some of these things too, just because of his high level feel for the game. For the LSU side, because I don't know how many Louisiana versus all y'all viewers want to listen to us praise the guy heading to Ohio State for the entire episode. But the LSU side, I think this makes that Dylan Perger addition that we talked about last week that much bigger as another versatile defensive back in that LSU 2026 secondary right now, along with Aiden Hall. And obviously the Tigers with Jake Olson, Corey Raymond and company are still in play for a lot of really, really talented defensive backs. But that was one of my takeaways as well, as the prize commitment from Dylan Perger now a week and a half ago feels that much more critical. Your thoughts on where LSU stands right now with that latest addition, as well as just knowing that they're still in the mix with a lot of guys here as we head into April.
Yeah, I said this on the Hunt Palmer show yesterday. Let's not hit the panic button if you're an LSU fan. Blaine Bradford might be the number 1 safety in the country. Aiden Hall is the number 3 safety in the country, and I'm pretty sure he's top 5 anywhere you look. I can say that blindly, I would assume. Dylan Perger coming off a fantastic junior season at Tuskegee High School in Alabama. I don't want to say the Diet Coke version of Blaine Bradford, but he's just a little bit smaller, but a lot of the overlapping skill set. I think he can also play free safety or slide into that nickel spot. And Coach Olson and Coach Raymond have a couple of offers out, a couple of kids that have visited. Lasiah Jackson from South Georgia is a long, rangy safety from a place that's produced a lot of NFL safeties out there in South Georgia. I know he picked up an offer when the coaches were out on the road in January. I would expect to see him sometime on campus this summer getting worked out. And Donovan Webb out of Frisco, Texas, was just on campus a couple of weeks ago. A top 250 safety in a lot of places. Here's what LSU is going to do. They're going to recruit Blaine Bradford, and they're going to say, if you don't want to be here, we're going to recruit over you, and we're going to leave a spot open for you. And the way that Jake Olson and Corey Raymond recruit for that secondary, they're going to find blue chippers. They're going to find really good players. It's April 1st, and they still have camp season to find even more weapons from out of state. But of course, if you were to guess, Brian Kelly, Corey Raymond, Jake Olson would rather have the Louisiana player first and foremost. But until Blaine says no, they're going to over recruit that position. And so far, they have the groundwork for a really great secondary class. We haven't even gotten into their cornerback options. That's a story for another day. But at safety, Aiden Hall and Dylan Purter is a really good starting point with two of the best safeties in the Southeast.
Wanted to take some time looking at the rest of the movement around Louisiana in March too. We've been really heavy on LSU since we kind of got back into our flow, and obviously talked an awful lot of some of the great additions for the Tigers. And now, this week a miss for the Tigers with Blaine Bradford heading out of state. But Louisiana Tech, I thought, had a really nice March, and also a couple of additions. If you go back to the eve of March on February 28th for the Cajuns with a couple of additions, looking at Louisiana Tech's March, they add Nathan Green, the versatile athlete from out there in Shreveport. They were really big in the Shreveport area in this month for the Bulldogs and Coach Cumbie. Johnny Casey Jr., two-way standout for Evangel Christian, speedy athlete out there. Kenny Thomas, the running back from North DeSoto, super productive, versatile running back, a guy that was running 4.4s on college campuses and 10.9s on the track and all those things over the past year. And then dipping a little bit further down south for Emmanuel Collins, the south side defensive back down there under Jess Curtis, as well as Franklin Morgan Jr., a versatile athlete for a meet who we expect to play defensive back at the next level, potentially corner. And so a lot of these guys are a little bit more under the radar for some fans, certainly, than some of the guys that we've been talking about recently with, Jabari Mack and Kenny Darby and Blaine Bradford and all these guys in that LSU class. But I thought a really nice group overall when you're, getting the ball rolling for that 2026 class for the Bulldogs. A lot of speed all over the place, a lot of versatility of some guys that have played a wide range of positions. And I think the guy that probably stands out as much to each of us, if I had a guess, is Nathan Green, who we both think really highly of his next level potential. Think he has, some of the best ceiling in this class around Louisiana. He's obviously a guy that's been a little bit underrated in some ways. I think him bouncing around some schools and whatnot has probably slowed down some of his recruiting at times. But he's someone that I think if he's locked in and headed the right direction, got the right voices in his ear and whatnot, that he has the potential of an SEC level guy. Your thoughts as we kind of look at those 5 Louisiana Tech commits from March, and in particular, Nate?
Yeah, well, definitely, I couldn't agree more. I think the crown jewel of those recruits getting on board would be Nathan Green. Seeing what he did at LSU camp last year, that was my first look at him in person. Really impressive getting downfield, moved extremely naturally, great hands, flies downfield, was able to separate easily. And I would put a mid 3-star grade on him, thinking he was probably going to land a couple of SEC offers or Power 4 offers at the least. But as you mentioned, sometimes changing schools, changing scenery, it's a great get for Louisiana Tech to get him on board early on. If things work out, they're going to get a ball player that's going to be able to stretch the field and add to that speed that they're able to get in this class so far. Something I thought that was actually lacking in their class in previous cycles under Cumbie, which you would be a little bit surprised to think about when you think about when he came from TCU and all the speed that they recruit. So I love them getting back to speed. That's what Louisiana Tech football is all about. And so is recruiting the 318. We talk about this with all of our in-state schools, but in particular, Louisiana Tech, Ruston and Shreveport, no question, that has to be the area to start at. So I love what you talk about, a big March, a big early spring, and the majority of those commitments come from the 318. That's a great nucleus. Those are kids that want to be playing in Ruston, that want to be Bulldogs. You get them on early, you build the class around them, and that's your foundation in place. And I love that Nathan Green is a part of that for Coach Cumbie and the Bulldogs.
Yeah, that's a handful of guys that I don't know exactly where I've had them all ranked in Prep Red Zone Louisiana rankings, but a lot of highly ranked, top 100 guys in the class in state, and the obvious Shreveport flavor. And you talk about maybe wanting to see some more speed from some recent classes. I think when you start adding guys like Kenny Thomas and Johnny Casey and Nathan Green, you certainly address some of that. A couple of additions for the Cajuns. I mentioned going back to past March to February 28th, which coincidentally is my little brother's birthday, Christian Brooks, the Zachary wide receiver, two-way standout for the Broncos, committed that day. They also added Roderick Bingham, fantastic safety from Plaquemine, a couple of guys that I like an awful lot. I know both of those have been in prep red zones, top 50-ish, 50 to 55 type guys, I think, in the class. And Christian is a guy that is a long, lean receiver that can get downfield in a hurry as well. I really like his burst both off the line, and then if you hit him on some quicker routes or a little screen game, he gets upfield in a hurry. And Roderick Bingham, again, any safety we talk about that has some versatility and can, get physical around the line of scrimmage, cover a lot of ground on the back end. They're not all Blaine Bradford, but Roderick is another really intriguing, more under the radar, versatile safety in this class that I think the Cajuns have done a nice job of recruiting both of those schools in particular, Zachary and Plaquemine, and have themselves another couple of great steals from those programs to continue those pipelines. Any thoughts on those guys? I think you're familiar a little bit with Christian probably, but just thoughts on a couple of these pipelines that the Cajuns continue to work and find guys that are maybe not as high profile of prospects, but bring so much to their respective rooms in Lafayette.
Yeah, no, Christian was definitely the highlight of those two commitments for the Cajuns. Like you mentioned, I've seen Christian a few times in passing. He's a big frame receiver. You know how I feel with in-state recruiting with these big athletes, much like the safety / receiver from Central last year. That's a guy you want in your class, a guy that is raw, a moldable piece of clay. Christian could play 2 to 3 different positions, definitely be a special teamer in Lafayette. I love what we've seen early on from him. And again, I think with a player like this who's still a little bit raw, is oozing with upside, and whatever position he eventually specializes in, you're probably going to get the best version of him in a couple of years once he starts, specializing and training for that position.
Yeah, he's a guy that's been split between high level football and basketball program, and you kind of throw him that moniker that some guys take of the Slim Reaper sort of build to what he brings to the field. I think when he gets to the football program and he is in college level football year round, right, strength and conditioning program there, as great of a job as they do with that at the high school level at Zachary, when he's in a Division I FBS strength program and continues to fill out and develop physically, I'm really looking forward to what the future looks like for him. He had Pitt come in just the other day with another offer, and so he's got some notable offers from around the country, but the Cajuns have been on him heavily from very early on in his recruiting process, and continue to do a really nice job recruiting Zachary. Any other thoughts? I mean, you mentioned before we're theoretically heading to OT7 and, keeping our hands folded, praying for some good weather this weekend in Dallas. But just as we kick off April, things that you're watching ahead in Louisiana or for some of these Louisiana schools?
Yeah, I guess we'll keep the theme of ruining LSU fans' days. It's April 1st, and Lamar Brown, the other number 1 player in the state of Louisiana, is set to return to Texas A&M this weekend. That will be his second visit in College Station in 3 weeks. He did make his first visit out to Miami last weekend. He said he grew up always wanting to visit Miami, and he got that experience meeting Jason Taylor, sat in the room with him. But I digress to point out that Louisiana has, and we've talked about this, I think it's their best class talent-wise at the top, and then maybe depth-wise, maybe since 2016 is that class is kind of always as special to me. With how deep it was and how star-studded it was, how many of those guys were on national championships. It's a little bit dicey when you look at the top, maybe in the spring, with Blaine Bradford now heading to Ohio State. I think this Lamar Brown battle between LSU and A&M has gotten so close that it might be favoring the out-of-state Aggies at this point. We'll see how this weekend goes back in College Station. But nonetheless, Jabari Mack, Kenny Darby, Aiden Hall, Big Rich Anderson, Ja'Kai Anderson. LSU has put down a fantastic foundation. And when the state is as loaded with talent as it is, and LSU is able to keep a majority inside the boot, those are the kind of recruiting hauls that end up putting LSU in those national championships, in those SEC title games under their best seasons. So if you're an LSU fan and you're looking at the top 10, top 15, I think there's going to be a lot of purple and gold overall with a lot of these blue chippers. But I know you and I both know that they're not going to looking at the 15 deep. They're looking at the 2 or 3 deep, and they're looking at potentially Blaine and Lamar maybe heading out of state. And I'd say this, just like we talked about Blaine, it's going to be a long way until December. So if they're able to create this foundation and keep the majority committed early on in spring and summer, they're going to have a shot to flip 1, 2, or X amount of kids by the buzzer. And if they don't, they don't. But they've shown in the past that they've been able to overcome this. Guys like Gabe Relaford, Dominic McKinley, they've been there. They've done that. It's just become a little bit more of a drama-filled cycle for the Tigers. And I think that comes with the territory of having such a talent-rich class this year, which, like you said, not just for Louisiana, but this is on a national scale. You're talking about Lamar Brown as the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country. Blaine Bradford is the number 1 safety in the country. Big Rich Anderson is the number 1 interior defensive lineman in the country. There's a lot of star power in the boot, as it always is. And this year, the magnifying glass is just on the Tigers to keep those guys home. I would say let's not read into everything on April 1st, and let's revisit this when the weather's a little bit cooler.
Yeah, always a long stretch, a long haul in the recruiting game to make sure that you're, staying ahead throughout, because these commitments, they mean something at this point, but they don't mean anything close to what that actual pen to paper means by the time you get to December. And so we still have 8 months left until some of these things become official. We'll be watching that. Make sure you keep up with us. He's Sam Spiegel, and I'm Jarrett Roser. Hopefully we'll be together this weekend in Dallas. We'll see how the weather treats us. But as always, thank y'all for tuning into Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit Dat Boot. And until next time, y'all be well.